May 23, 1943, North Atlantic, 540 kilometers southwest of Ireland. Captain Lieutenant Bernhard Muller stood in the conning tower view, 672, sweeping the dull gray horizon with his Zeiss binoculars. The ocean lay unnaturally still, too still. After 5 war patrols over 18 months, Muller had learned to respect that sensation, the quiet warning that separated those who survived from those who didn't. Below decks, 48 men moved through the U-boat with practiced precision. They understood what these waters meant. Every minute here was time borrowed from fate. U-672 was a Type 7 submarine, the backbone of the German Navy. She could dive to 200 meters. She could remain submerged for 36 hours. She had endured this long because her commander made choices others hesitated to make, decisive when aggression was required, restrained when caution was the only path to survival. Then Muller heard something wrong. Not through the hydrophones, through the open air. Distinct splashes, several of them, landing in a deliberate pattern around a boat, like stones being dropped by an unseen hand. Muller stiffened and grabbed the voice pipe. Hydrophone operator, report immediately. What are we hearing? The reply came back quickly. Her captain, no contacts detected. No ship propellers. No aircraft engines. Nothing, only the splashes. Muller's jaw tightened. He had been trained in every dimension of submarine warfare. He knew how to read the sea. He knew how to stalk prey beneath it. But this made no sense. Hard to starboard. Dive to 60 meters. Silent running. The alarms echoed through the boat. Men rushed to their stations. Diesel engines shut down. Electric motors took over. The bow dipped, and U-672 slid beneath the surface. Bernhard Muller was not a man who panicked. At 31, he had already sent 7 Allied merchant ships to the bottom, more than 38,000 tons destroyed. He wore the Iron Cross, first class. He had faced death underwater often enough to understand its rules. Every crisis followed logic. Every threat had a pattern. Depth charges were brutal but predictable. You heard them fall, counted the seconds, waited for the shock. Aircraft attacks were frightening but understandable. Planes could only see you on the surface. This was different. His crew trusted him because he brought them back alive. 42 of the 48 men had served under him for at least 2 years. They knew his rhythm. They knew that when Muller chose to attack, to dive, or to flee, the decision was grounded in experience paid for by survival itself. And now, for first time, he faced something that did not fit the rules he knew to U-672 had been commissioned barely 6 months earlier. She was quick, responsive, and still new enough that every patrol taught Muller another lesson about survival in 1943, at a time when the balance of the underwater war was clearly turning against Germany. The U-boat campaign that had reached its peak in 1942 was becoming steadily more lethal. In November of that year alone, German submarines had sunk 119 Allied merchant vessels, more than 700,000 tons. But 1943 was different. Allied detection had improved dramatically. Convoys were being rerouted with precision. Veteran commanders were increasingly forced to abandon attacks before they could even begin. In the mess at Lorient, Muller had heard the whispers. Secret devices. New radar. Some unseen advantage the enemy now possessed. Still, each day he survived felt like proof that he was doing something right up until May 23, 1943. Muller climbed down into the control room. First Watch Officer Klaus Schellinger stood at the periscope, tense and focused. Her captain, destroyer contact, bearing red 135. Single screw, speed 18 knots, approaching from the north. Modern escort, moving with military discipline. Range for 1,000 meters, outside visual. Muller acknowledged with a nod. A destroyer alone was manageable. The real objective was never the escort. It was the convoy protected. That was why he had come to the Atlantic, to strike the supply arteries feeding Britain's war machine. Full stop, Muller ordered. All hands, minimum noise, silent running. Wait. The U-boat fell into near total silence. The hydrophone operator tracked the approaching ship. Twin screws detected. British Flower-class corvette, range 3,000 meters and closing. Muller felt a subtle change in the atmosphere. A Flower class meant escort duty. Escort duty meant a convoy nearby, and a convoy meant opportunity. But it also meant danger. At its current course, the corvette's patrol would bring it directly over U-672's position in roughly 90 minutes. Its active sonar was sweeping the water, audible even through German hydrophones. What Muller could not know was what lay beyond his instruments. The destroyer was not alone. Behind it, HMS Oral was maneuvering into position. Above them, guided by radio intelligence, a Lockheed Hudson aircraft was adjusting its patrol path to pass directly over Muller's location at dusk. The tension inside a submerged U-boat, waiting for an escort to cross overhead, defies easy description. 48 men, no room to maneuver, no speed to escape, nothing to do but lie still and listen as the destroyer propellers slowly grew louder. Muller sat motionless in his chair. He did not shift, did not speak. His crew understood the silence instinctively. No one said a word. The hydrophone operator pressed the headphones tightly against his ears. Time stretched strangely beneath the sea. Destroyer bearing red 10, range 1,000 meters. Muller gave a slow nod. At that speed, the escort would cross directly above them in 4 minutes. Range 500 meters. The sound of the screws became unmistakable, the steady churn of a steam turbine. The vibration could be felt through the pressure hull itself. Range 200 meters. Then it was there, directly overhead. Muller's hands rested calmly on the chart table. This was the moment when destroyers usually struck. This was when depth charges should fall. Nothing happened. The escort continued past them. The hydrophone operator followed the machinery noise as it moved away. Destroyer at 0 range. Opening distance. No attack pattern detected. Muller finally exhaled. They had gone unnoticed. Their position was still hidden. In another hour, once darkness fully settled in, he could risk surfacing and attacking. That was all he needed. Maintain silent running, he ordered. Continuous monitoring. Report any change. What Muller did not know was that HMS Oral was already maneuvering into position ahead of him. What he did not know was that he had less than 6 hours left to live. Full darkness arrived at 20-30 hours. Surface the boat, Muller ordered. Compressed air roared into the ballast tanks. Deck vents opened. U-672 rose through the black water toward the surface. Muller felt the familiar transformation, the shift from hidden prey to surface hunter. On the surface at night, a U-boat regained its speed, agility, and killing power. The conning tower broke the surface. Muller was already climbing out, his eyes fully adjusted to the darkness. Ahead, he could make out the convoy, 7 merchant ships, their silhouettes faintly visible some 30 kilometers away, outlined by starlight. There was no moon. Conditions were ideal. To the north, the destroyer remained a distant shadow. Battle stations. Prepare all torpedo tube for attack. The command rippled through U-672. The crew responded instantly, moving with the practiced precision of men who knew that seconds meant everything. The torpedo crew rushed to their stations. Schellinger worked through the firing solution. Speed, range, angles, the cold mathematics of destruction. Muller raised his binoculars and focused on the targets ahead. Through his binoculars, Muller picked out the lead ship, a British freighter, perhaps 3,000 tons. A straightforward target. Behind it sailed a second vessel, larger, heavily laden than a third. Altogether, the convoy likely carried more than 22,000 tons of Allied cargo. Muller did not dwell on the sailors aboard those ships. His thoughts were fixed on what they carried: ammunition, fuel, food, everything required to keep the war against Germany alive. Every ton sent to bottom was a ton that would never reach Britain. He called to Schellinger. Estimate 12,000 meters to the nearest merchantman. Destroyer bearing red 340. Range 8,000 meters, moving northeast. Time to solution? 30 seconds, Schellinger replied. Muller kept his eyes on the convoy. At this range, the torpedoes would need roughly 2 minutes to reach their targets. The escort would take at least 5 minutes to identify the attack and respond. If the first strike hit, there would be time for another salvo, enough to sink 2 ships, perhaps even 3, before the destroyer could close in. "Solution ready," Schellinger announced. The numbers were perfect, distance, speed, angle, all aligned. Muller raised his hand. First salvo. All bow tubes. Fire. The torpedoes surged from their tubes. 2 G7E electric torpedoes running at 35 knots toward the convoy. Muller turned to issue orders for a second attack. Then the sea erupted, not ahead, where the merchant ships lay, but everywhere. Massive splashes tore through the surface in a precise, unnatural pattern. Ahead, astern to port, to starboard. Violent columns of water slammed down around you. 672. Muller had never witnessed anything like it. "Crash dive," he shouted. Hard to starboard. All hands braced for impact. But there was nowhere to escape. The depth below was 300 meters. And these were not depth charges. They did not arc downward or detonate beneath the surface. This was something else. Something striking the water at tremendous speed. The first projectile hit the conning tower. It was small, perhaps a kilogram, but traveling at nearly 400 meters per second. It punched through the steel plating, as if it were paper, and detonated on contact with the pressure hull. Muller felt the blow more than he heard it. A brutal tearing shock as the integrity of the boat was ripped apart. Then he felt himself falling. The world reeled around him. He could taste blood in his mouth. His ears rang violently from the blast. All around him, 672 was breaking apart. Seawater poured into the conning tower. The superstructure had been ripped open in 3 different places. Below, the forward torpedo room had been torn apart by the impact, and water was flooding in uncontrollably. Men screamed in panic as the boat listed sharply. The pressure that kept the Atlantic outside the hull was now failing everywhere at once. Muller dragged himself toward the voice pipe. "Flood all compartments. Get the men topside. We're sinking." This was no longer submarine combat. This was annihilation. Another pattern of projectiles slammed into the sea. Then another. Each wave consisted of self-propelled, contact-detonating warheads. Each one was designed specifically to punch through a submarine's hull. Each represented a technology Muller had never encountered in 18 months of war patrols. He did not know its name. He did not know it was called Hedgehog. He did not know it was a forward-firing mortar system that allowed an escort to attack without losing sonar contact. He did not know it could launch 24 projectiles in under a minute, arranged so that at least one would strike any submarine caught within the pattern. He only knew that he was dying. His boat was dying. His men were dying. 672 sank in 94 seconds. Muller and 36 others made it into the water as the submarine slipped beneath the surface. The temperature was 3 degrees Celsius, cold enough to sap strength quickly, though not immediately fatal. Hypothermia would begin within an hour. Muller clung to a piece of wooden grating, his uniform soaked, his body already surrendering heat to the Atlantic. Around him, the cries of wounded and drowning men carried across the dark water. HMS Oriole arrived first, the trawler that had coordinated the attack with the destroyer. Life nets were thrown over the side. Muller caught one and hauled himself upward. A British sailor, seeing the German uniform, reached out and helped pull him aboard. 20 minutes later, the remaining escorts recovered the rest of the survivors. 36 men out of 48 lived. 12 were dead or missing. Muller found himself on the deck of HMS Sharpshooter, wrapped in a Royal Navy blanket, shivering uncontrollably from cold and shock. An older British officer approached him. Captain James Macintyre of the Royal Navy, commander of the escort group. Macintyre showed no cruelty. Speaking calmly in German, he said, "Your submarine was destroyed by our newest weapon. We call it the Hedgehog. It's a forward-firing mortar system. When you surfaced to attempt a night attack, sonar picked you up. We launched 24 shaped charges in a fixed pattern. You never had a chance." Muller remained silent. He was struggling to absorb what he was hearing. A weapon system so new and so refined that it could be used without breaking sonar contact. A system powerful enough to turn what should have been a textbook night attack into total destruction in less than 2 minutes. Macintyre went on. This is the third U-boat we've sunk with Hedgehog in the last 3 weeks. Word will reach your high command soon enough. The old rules of submarine warfare are over. Your boats can no longer stalk convoys on the surface at night. Darkness no longer protects you. We can detect you, track you, and strike without ever losing contact. Muller understood. He understood with painful clarity. For years, every U-boat commander in the Atlantic had believed that night surface attacks were their greatest strength. Escorts couldn't see them. Convoys couldn't see them. Only the periscope needed eyes on the target. That doctrine had guided operations for 3 years. Hedgehog destroyed that belief, not through greater explosive force, but through a superior system. A weapon that didn't require sonar contact to be broken. A weapon that removed guesswork and chance. A weapon that turned the U-boat's greatest advantage, attacking from darkness and concealment, into a fatal weakness. Muller grasped something even more fundamental. Hedgehog was not revolutionary because of how hard it struck. U-boats had survived far heavier depth-charge barges. It was revolutionary because it permanently altered the relationship between hunter and hunted. To attack, a U-boat had a surface. A surface U-boat could be detected by sonar. And in May 1943, a detected U-boat was already dead. The logic was simple, and it was merciless. The balance had shifted completely in favor of the escorts. That night, still trembling from cold and shock, Muller sat in the captain's cabin aboard HMS Sharpshooter and grasped a truth that would take the German Navy another month to fully comprehend. The Battle of the Atlantic had not been lost because Germany lacked U-boats. It had not been lost due to shortages of torpedoes, fuel, or supplies. It had been lost to system, a tightly integrated network of technologies working in perfect coordination. Hedgehog mortars, centimetric radar, high-frequency direction finding, escort carriers, sonar, and disciplined convoy tactics. Each element alone was dangerous. Together, they made continued U-boat operations impossible. High-frequency direction finding could locate a U-boat's radio transmissions from hundreds of kilometers away. Centimetric radar could spot a surface submarine from 30 kilometers, regardless of weather or darkness. Escort carriers added aircraft that could hunt relentlessly from the air, dropping depth charges or strafing with guns. And when a U-boat attempted to escape by diving, sonar held contact beneath the surface while Hedgehog waited above, ready to strike at the precise moment. Each component amplified the others. Sonar detected you. Radar fixed your position. Direction finding closed off escape routes. Hedgehog denied you the safety of depth. There was no effective counter, no reliable evasion, no escape. Admiral Donitz would not see this clearly at first. The German Naval High Command would not either. They would interpret the collapse of the U-boat campaign in May 1943, Black May, when 43 submarines were lost and more than 1,000 submariners killed, as a shortage of boats, not a failure of understanding. But Muller understood. Sitting in that cabin on May 24th, 1943, knowing that 36 of his men had been pulled alive from the sea, while 12 were dead or missing, he grasped the reality. The decisive weapon was not Hedgehog itself. The weapon was the system, and Germany had no answer to it. Bernhard Muller spent the next 2 years in British and Canadian prisoner of war camps after the loss of U-672. He survived the war. He survived the peace that followed. Later, he would describe the night of May 23, 1943, as the moment submarine warfare irrevocably changed. Unlike many German commanders who blamed defeats on material shortages, Muller recognized something far more fundamental. They had believed that courage, training, and determination could overcome any disadvantage. That belief had finally met its limits. The Hedgehog revealed a hard truth. Technology was no longer just a tool of warfare. It was warfare. Every ship we constructed, every doctrine we refined, every courageous sailor we sent into combat could be made irrelevant overnight by an enemy system that was more advanced and better integrated. Muller's understanding was unusual among German officers. Most explained the catastrophic U-boat losses as the result of misfortune or a lack of material resources. Mueller saw something else entirely. The decisive factor was systems. Integration. The Allies' ability to merge every technological advantage into a single, unified anti-submarine warfare network, one that rendered individual bravery meaningless. Hedgehog was not revolutionary because of the size of an explosive charge. It was revolutionary because it permanently altered the balance between hunter and hunted. A U-boat that chose to attack had to surface. A surface U-boat could be detected by sonar. And in May 1943, a detected U-boat was already doomed. Thank you for watching. If you found Mueller's story engaging, please like and subscribe. We're committed to uncovering the overlooked moments of the Second World War, the stories of men who learned, too late, that technology can defeat courage. Where are you watching from, and which forgotten World War II stories would you like us to explore next? Your support helps us continue bringing these histories to life.